Hey, I just want to say a quick thank you for finding the channel. It's been pretty tricky, but we're getting there. Relax, and I hope you enjoy. Here we go. Evelyn Parker had always been fascinated by the digital world. From a young age, she was known as a whiz kid, someone who could crack codes and navigate the complexities of technology with ease. After earning a degree in computer science and cybersecurity, she quickly established a reputation as one of the most skilled hackers in the industry, a reputation she had cultivated not just for her skills, but for her ethical stance on using those skills to expose corruption and wrongdoing. At 28, Evelyn worked as a freelance cybersecurity consultant, often hired by companies to assess their vulnerabilities and protect their data. But her real passion lay in uncovering the truth behind corporate malfeasance, and she often found herself drawn to investigations that exposed corporate greed. One rainy evening, as she sat in her modest apartment surrounded by computer screens, she received an alarming message from a client. The company, Zenith Corp., a large tech conglomerate, had experienced a significant data breach, and sensitive information had been leaked onto the dark web. Zenith was in a panic, and they needed someone to investigate the breach and mitigate the damage. Evelyn accepted the job, intrigued by the challenge. As she began her work, she quickly discovered that the breach was far more complex than it appeared. The initial analysis revealed that sensitive data, including customer information, financial records, and internal communications, had been compromised. But as she delved deeper into the breach, she stumbled upon something much more sinister. While sifting through the compromised files, Evelyn found a series of encrypted documents that piqued her interest. They appeared to be internal communications between high-ranking executives at Zenith, discussing a project that involved manipulating the market to inflate their stock prices. The more she uncovered, the more concerned she became. It was clear that this was not just a simple breach. It was a cover-up of corporate crime. Evelyn knew she had to act quickly. If the executives at Zenith were involved in illegal activities, it was her responsibility to expose them. She spent the next few days meticulously decrypting the documents and piecing together the evidence. As she worked, she could feel the weight of the truth bearing down on her. This was not just about the breach, it was about justice. One night, as she reviewed the decrypted messages, Evelyn's heart raced. She discovered a detailed plan outlining how Zenith intended to hide their fraudulent activities by creating a fake cybersecurity incident, a situation that would divert attention from their illegal practices. It was an elaborate scheme that involved manipulating financial reports and deceiving investors. "This is huge," Evelyn muttered to herself, realizing the implications of what she had found. They're planning to cover their tracks by framing the breach as an attack on their integrity. With the evidence in hand, Evelyn faced a dilemma. She could report her findings to the authorities, but she knew that corporate giants often had their own ways of silencing whistleblowers. Instead, she decided to reach out to a trusted journalist, Mark Thompson, who had a reputation for exposing corporate wrongdoing. "Mark, I have something important to share," Evelyn said when she finally managed to get him on the phone. "It's about Zenith Corp, and I believe it could lead to a major story." "Zenith, the tech giant?" Mark asked, his interest piqued. "What do you have?" Evelyn took a deep breath, recounting her findings and the implications of the documents she had decrypted. Mark listened intently, his journalistic instincts kicking into high gear. "This is explosive, Evelyn. If you can provide me with evidence, we can take this public." Over the next few days, Evelyn worked closely with Mark, compiling the information and preparing for the inevitable fallout. They crafted a strategy to ensure that the story would be impactful, but also safe. They decided to release the information in stages, allowing time for verification and safeguarding against any potential backlash. As they prepared for the first wave of the story, Evelyn felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew they were treading dangerous ground, but the thought of exposing Zenith's corruption fueled her resolve. She had seen firsthand the impact corporate greed could have on individuals and communities, and she was committed to making a difference. The day the story broke, The media erupted with headlines about Zenith's alleged corporate crime. Reports flooded in, detailing the company's fraudulent practices and the impending investigation. The public outrage was swift, and the executives at Zenith found themselves in a precarious position. But as the story gained traction, Evelyn received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. It was one of her contacts, a fellow hacker who worked in the same circles. "Evelyn, you need to be careful. I've heard whispers that Zenith is looking for you," he warned, his voice filled with urgency. "What do you mean?" Evelyn asked, her heart racing. "They're not just going to sit back and let this happen. They have resources, and they'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests," he explained. Evelyn's mind raced as she considered the implications. She had known that exposing Zenith would put her in danger, but the reality of it was sinking in. "What should I do?" she asked, feeling vulnerable. "Lay low for a while. Don't share your location or any sensitive information with anyone. Keep your head down until things settle," he advised. As she hung up the phone, fear washed over her. She had fought so hard for justice, but now it felt like the walls were closing in. She needed to protect herself, but she also couldn't abandon the fight. She had come too far to turn back now. In the days that followed, the investigation into Zenith intensified. Law enforcement agencies launched inquiries, and the company faced mounting pressure from investors and the public. Evelyn watched as the fallout unfolded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and trepidation. But as the heat turned up, so did the threats. One evening, as she was working late in her apartment, she received a message that sent a chill down her spine. "You should have stayed quiet. You're in over your head." Evelyn's heart raced as she scanned her surroundings, feeling the weight of danger looming. She knew she had to act quickly to protect herself. She contacted Mark, who had been following the developments closely. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "I think they're on to me." "Meet me at the cafe on Maple Street," he replied, his tone serious. "We'll figure this out." When they met, Mark could see the fear in Evelyn's eyes. "We need to go public with everything we have," he suggested. "If we expose them further, it'll be harder for them to retaliate." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "But what if they find out who I am? I can't risk my safety." "Then we take precautions. We can use anonymous channels to share the information with other journalists and activists. We'll make sure your identity stays protected," Mark assured her. As they developed a plan, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of determination. She couldn't allow fear to dictate her actions. They began compiling all the evidence and reached out to activists and organizations that could help amplify their message. Meanwhile, Zenith's executives were scrambling to regain control. They hired private investigators and security teams to track down the source of the leak. The pressure was mounting, and Evelyn knew that time was of the essence. One night, as she worked late in her apartment, she received a notification on her computer. It was a message from an unknown sender. "We know what you're doing. Stop now, or you'll regret it." Fear surged through her, but she refused to back down. Instead, she decided to take a proactive approach. She contacted her fellow hackers, reaching out to those who had a reputation for standing up to corporate corruption. Together, they formed a coalition to rally against Zenith's practices. As the coalition grew, Evelyn's courage deepened. They began to share information about Zenith's fraudulent activities with the public, using social media and underground forums to spread the word. The response was overwhelming, and soon, a movement began to form around the fight for corporate accountability. But as the stakes rose, so did the dangers. Evelyn received more threats, and she could feel the pressure mounting. She knew she had to protect herself, but she also felt a sense of responsibility to continue the fight. The movement was gaining traction, and she couldn't let fear silence her. In the midst of the chaos, Evelyn received a call from Mark. "We need to meet." "I have something important to discuss," he said, his tone urgent. When they met, Mark looked serious. "We have a lead on one of the executives involved in the cover-up. I think we can connect the dots and expose them further." Evelyn's heart raced. "Who is it?" "David Caldwell, the CFO. He was heavily involved in the financial manipulations, and I have evidence that links him to the cover-up," Mark explained. Let's gather everything we have and go public, Evelyn suggested, her determination unwavering. As they prepared to launch the next phase of their investigation, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come too far to turn back now, and the stakes had never been higher. The day they decided to go public was tense. They organized a press conference, inviting journalists, activists, and members of the community to join them. Evelyn stood at the podium, her heart racing as she faced the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are here today to expose the truth about Zenith Corp and the corporate greed that has been hidden for too long." As she presented the evidence, detailing the fraudulent practices and the cover-up, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The crowd was captivated, their interest piqued by the revelations. Evelyn felt a surge of empowerment as she shared her story, knowing that she was fighting for something bigger than herself. But as the presentation came to a close, she noticed a familiar figure in the back of the room, David Caldwell. He stood there, his expression dark and menacing, and Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. After the conference, news outlets began to pick up the story, and the movement grew. People rallied behind Evelyn's cause, calling for accountability and transparency from corporations. But as the pressure mounted on Zenith, so did the threats against Evelyn. One night, as she was leaving the office, she received a message that sent her heart racing. "You've gone too far. We won't let you ruin us." Fear engulfed her as she rushed to her car, her mind racing with the implications of the threat. She knew she had to stay vigilant, but she also couldn't let fear dictate her actions. In the days that followed, Evelyn received word that authorities were investigating Zenith and David Caldwell's involvement in the fraud. The pressure was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. As the investigation unfolded, Evelyn found herself in a precarious position. The threats continued, but she refused to back down. She was determined to see the fight through to the end, no matter the cost. Months passed, and the investigation reached a breaking point. David Caldwell was arrested, and the evidence against Zenith began to mount. As the news broke, Evelyn felt a surge of relief. Justice was finally within reach. But as the dust settled, Evelyn received a final threat, a message warning her to stop speaking out or face dire consequences. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers she had faced throughout her journey. In response, Evelyn took a stand. She knew that she had to protect herself and her cause. She reached out to law enforcement, sharing all the evidence she had gathered and detailing the threats. As the investigation progressed, the truth emerged. Zenith Corp faced multiple lawsuits, and the executives involved in the cover-up were brought to justice. The movement Evelyn had started gained momentum, and she found herself at the forefront of a wave of change. In the end, Evelyn emerged from the battle stronger than ever. She had faced the shadows of corporate greed and emerged victorious, proving that even in the darkest moments, the truth could prevail. As she reflected on her journey, she knew that the fight for justice was far from over, but she also understood that she had the power to make a difference, to stand up against corruption, and to inspire others to do the same. The experience had transformed her, and as she looked toward the future, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. With her skills and determination, she would continue to fight for justice, ensuring that the truth would never be silenced again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor of Claire Thompson's living room, illuminating the stack of bills and unopened mail that cluttered her coffee table. It had been one of those weeks, stressful and exhausting, with work piling up and deadlines looming. As a successful marketing executive at a thriving tech company, Claire was accustomed to the pressure, but lately, it felt as though the weight of the world was resting squarely on her shoulders. Claire had built her life on hard work and determination, clawing her way up the corporate ladder after graduating from university. She had fought through the challenges of being a single mother to her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, and had managed to create a comfortable life for them both. But beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life lay a dark secret that she had worked tirelessly to bury, a mistake from her past that threatened to unravel everything she had built. Sinking into the plush sofa, Claire took a deep breath and picked up the first envelope from the stack. It was unremarkable, plain white with no return address, but as she opened it, her heart raced. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "I know what you did. It would be a shame if it got out." Claire's stomach dropped. She had received similar letters before, and each time they arrived, they sent a chill down her spine. She had dismissed them as the work of a misguided prankster, but now as she read the words again, the fear began to creep in. She couldn't afford for anyone to know about her past. It would ruin everything. She quickly glanced around her home, her heart pounding. Who could have sent this? And how much did they really know? The thought of someone lurking in the shadows of her life, ready to expose her, made her skin crawl. She needed to take action, but she didn't know where to start. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Claire sat down at her kitchen table, the letter laid out before her. She replayed the events of her past in her mind, the choices she had made, the mistakes she had tried to forget. It was a dark chapter in her life, one that she thought she had closed. But now it felt like the ghosts of her past were rising to haunt her. Claire picked up her phone and dialed her best friend, Jenna. "Hey, it's me," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can we talk?" "Of course. What's going on?" Jenna replied, concern evident in her tone. "I received another letter," Claire confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the same as the others, but this time it feels different. I'm scared." "Come over. We can figure this out together," Jenna urged. Within half an hour, Claire arrived at Jenna's apartment, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Jenna greeted her with a warm hug, sensing the turmoil that had been brewing inside her friend. "Let's sit down and talk," Jenna said, leading Claire to the living room. "What does the letter say?" As Claire recounted the contents of the letter, Jenna listened intently, her brow furrowing with worry. "This is serious, Claire. You need to go to the police." "I can't," Claire replied, shaking her head. "What if they dig too deep? What if they find out about my past?" "Your past doesn't define you," Jenna insisted. "But if someone is threatening you, you need to take it seriously. They might not be playing games." "I know," Claire said, her voice trembling. "But I don't want to relive it. I've worked so hard to move on." Jenna reached for Claire's hand, her grip firm. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together, but you have to trust me." With Jenna's encouragement, Claire reluctantly agreed to report the letters to the police. The next day, she found herself sitting in a small interrogation room at the local precinct, the sterile environment amplifying her anxiety. Officer Daniels, a seasoned detective with a kind demeanor, sat across from her, his notepad ready. "Can you tell me about the letters you've received?" he asked, his voice calm and reassuring. Claire took a deep breath, recounting the details as best as she could. "They started a few months ago, and they've been getting more frequent. At first, I thought it was just someone trying to scare me, but now I'm not so sure." "Do you have any idea who might be behind this?" Daniels asked, his pen poised over the notepad. "No, I have no clue," Claire admitted, her heart racing. "I've tried to think of anyone who might want to hurt me, but I can't come up with anyone." "Let's take a look at the letters," he suggested, and Claire handed over the most recent one. As Officer Daniels read it, she could see the wheels turning in his mind. "I take these threats seriously," he said, looking up at her. "We'll begin an investigation, but I need you to be careful. If someone is watching you, they may be more dangerous than you realize." After leaving the station, Claire felt a mix of relief and dread. She had taken the first step, but now the uncertainty loomed over her. As she drove home, her mind raced with thoughts of who could be behind the letters and what they might know. That evening, as she sat on the couch with Lily, the fear began to consume her. She had always prided herself on being a protective mother, but now she felt vulnerable. She couldn't let her past endanger her daughter's future. "Mom, can we watch a movie?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "Sure, sweetheart," Claire replied, forcing a smile. As they settled in for a family movie night, she tried to focus on her daughter, but the nagging feeling of dread lingered in the back of her mind. Days turned into weeks, and the letters continued to arrive, each one more threatening than the last. Claire felt as though she was being hunted, and the anxiety began to seep into every aspect of her life. She started to notice shadows lurking in the corners of her vision, people watching her in the grocery store, and unfamiliar cars parked outside her house. It was as if the threats had manifested into her reality. One evening, as Claire was sorting through the mail, she noticed something odd. Among the usual bills and junk mail was a small envelope with no return address. Her heart raced as she opened it, revealing yet another letter, but this one was different. It contained a photograph. The image was grainy, but it clearly showed a younger version of Claire standing outside a bar, laughing with friends. The date on the back of the photo sent chills down her spine. It was from the night of her darkest secret, the night that had changed everything. As she processed the implications of the photo, her hands trembled. Someone was digging deep into her past, unearthing memories she had buried for years. She felt a wave of nausea as the weight of her secret pressed down on her. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing her mother's pale expression. "Yeah, I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired," Claire replied, forcing a smile. But inside, she was spiraling. That night, Claire lay in bed, unable to shake the feeling of dread. She replayed the events of her past in her mind, the choices that had led her to this point. It had been years since she had made a decision that haunted her. The night she had gone to the bar and met someone who would change her life forever. The memory flooded back. The laughter, the drinks, the impulsive decisions that had culminated in a choice she had regretted. It was a night of reckless abandon, but it had also been a turning point that had set her on a path of secrecy and shame. As she lay there, she realized that someone was trying to force her to confront her past, to expose the truth that she had hidden for so long. Determined not to let fear control her, Claire decided that it was time to take matters into her own hands. She needed to find out who was behind the letters and what they wanted. The next day, she reached out to Officer Daniels again, her voice steady as she explained the situation. "I received another letter, and it came with a photograph from my past," she said, her heart racing. "I think whoever is doing this knows more about me than I realized." "I'll send a team to help you," Daniels assured her. "We'll start by analyzing the letters and see if we can trace them back to a source. But you must be careful. If they know about your past, they might be willing to do whatever it takes to silence you." As Claire hung up the phone, she felt a surge of determination. She had to confront her past head-on, and that meant seeking out the people who had been part of that life. With a plan in mind, she decided to visit the bar where the fateful night had taken place. The bar, now a shadow of its former self, was dimly lit and sparsely populated. As Claire walked in, the familiar smell of stale beer and old wood filled her nostrils, bringing back a flood of memories. She took a deep breath, steeling herself as she approached the bar. "Can I help you?" the bartender asked, eyeing her curiously. "I'm looking for someone who used to work here," Claire replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "His name is Mike. Do you know where I can find him?" The bartender hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I remember him. He left town a while ago. Last I heard, he was living in a nearby city. I can give you his last known address if you'd like." Claire felt a surge of hope. "Yes, please. That would be helpful." As the bartender scribbled down the address, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this was a step toward uncovering the truth. She had to confront Mike and find out what he knew about that night. Later that evening, Claire arrived at the address the bartender had given her. It was a modest apartment complex, and she felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as she approached the door. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. Moments later, the door creaked open to reveal Mike, a familiar face from her past. He looked older, wearier, but the spark of recognition lit up his eyes. "Claire, is that really you?" "Mike," Claire replied, her voice unsteady. "I need to talk to you. It's important." As they settled into his small living room, Claire felt the weight of her past settling in. "I received some letters, and they're connected to that night we spent at the bar," she said, trying to gauge his reaction. Mike's expression shifted, concern etched on his face. "What do you mean?" "I don't know who's behind it, but they seem to know everything about me," Claire explained, her voice trembling. "I need to know what you remember about that night." Mike leaned back, a troubled expression crossing his face. "It was a long time ago, Claire. I remember we all had a good time, but I didn't think it would lead to something like this." "What do you mean?" she pressed, her heart racing. "There were things that happened that night. Things I didn't fully understand at the time," Mike admitted. "There were whispers about a deal, something that didn't feel right." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of deal?" "I don't know the details, but people were involved in something shady. I thought it was just bar talk, but looking back, I wonder if it was more serious," he said, his voice filled with regret. As Mike shared his memories, Claire began to piece together the fragments of that night. The laughter, the drinks, the reckless decisions, it all felt like a haze. But now, with the threat looming over her, it was becoming increasingly clear that she needed to confront the truth. "I can't let them use my past against me," Claire said, determination flooding her voice. "If there's something deeper, I need to find out what it is." "Be careful," Mike warned, his expression serious. "If they're watching you, it's not worth putting yourself in danger. But if you're intent on finding out, I'll help however I can." With Mike's support, Claire felt emboldened. They began to dig into old records and online archives, searching for any information that could lead them to the truth. As they worked late into the night, Claire felt a sense of urgency building within her. A few days later, while sifting through old news articles, they stumbled upon a report that made Claire's heart race. It detailed a series of shady business dealings connected to a local crime syndicate. The report mentioned a link to a bar that Mike had worked at, and the implications were staggering. "Look at this," Claire said, pointing to the article. "This could be connected to everything." Mike leaned in, his eyes wide with realization. "We need to investigate further. If there's a connection between the syndicate and what happened that night, it could explain the threats." They spent the next few days researching and connecting the dots. As they gathered evidence, Claire felt a mix of fear and determination. She was finally uncovering the truth, but it was becoming increasingly dangerous. One evening, as they were reviewing their findings, Claire received another anonymous letter, this time containing a single photograph. It showed her and Mike laughing at the bar, the date stamped on the bottom, a reminder of the past she had tried to escape. "Whoever is doing this is getting bolder," Mike said, his voice tense. "We need to take this to the police." "I can't," Claire replied, fear gripping her. "What if they discover my connection to the syndicate? Can't risk it." "Then what do we do?" Mike asked, frustration evident in his tone. "We keep digging," Claire said, her resolve hardening. "If we can find a way to expose them, we'll have the leverage we need." As they continued their investigation, they discovered that the syndicate was involved in a series of illegal activities, including drug trafficking and money laundering. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to uncovering something significant. One night, while working late at Mike's apartment, they received an unexpected visitor, a figure who entered through the back door, shrouded in darkness. "Who are you?" Claire demanded, her heart racing as she stood protectively in front of Mike. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face, Detective Harris, the officer who had initially taken Claire's report about the letters. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice calm. "I need to talk to you both." "About what?" Mike asked, his expression wary. "I've been following leads on the syndicate, and I believe you may have information that can help us," Harris explained. "I know about the threats you've been receiving, Claire." Claire's heart raced. "How do you know?" "Your case has attracted attention, and I've been monitoring the situation. I believe you're in danger," Harris said, his tone serious. "But if you cooperate, we can protect you." As they discussed the details, Claire felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the breakthrough they needed. She and Mike shared their findings with Harris, detailing everything they had uncovered about the syndicate and the connections to her past. "This is significant," Harris said, his eyes narrowing. "If we can connect these dots, we can take down the entire operation." As they worked together, the investigation began to unfold rapidly. With Harris's support, they gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and began to build a case against the syndicate. But as the pressure mounted, so did the danger. Late one evening, as Claire returned home after a meeting with Harris, she noticed a car parked outside her house. The engine was running, and a figure sat inside, watching her intently. Panic surged through her as she hurried inside, locking the door behind her. Her heart raced as she dialed Harris's number, her voice trembling. "I think they're watching me." "Stay calm. We're on our way," he replied, his voice steady. As she waited for the police to arrive, Claire felt a sense of dread settle over her. She had fought so hard to uncover the truth, but now it felt as though the shadows were closing in. When the police arrived, they quickly assessed the situation, but the car was gone. Detective Harris questioned her about the incident, assuring her that they would increase patrols in the area. "We'll keep you safe, Claire," he said, his tone reassuring, "but you need to stay vigilant. We're getting closer to bringing them down, but you have to cooperate." In the following weeks, as the investigation continued to unfold, Claire felt a mix of fear and determination. She had come too far to turn back now, and with the support of Harris and Mike, she was finally beginning to reclaim her life. As the final confrontation with the syndicate approached, Claire felt a surge of empowerment. They had gathered enough evidence to bring the criminals to justice, and she was ready to face the truth head-on. On the day of the operation, Claire stood alongside Detective Harris and Mike, her heart racing as they prepared to take down the syndicate. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and Claire knew that they were on the brink of something monumental. As they moved in, the tension reached a boiling point. The operation unfolded with precision, and the police apprehended key members of the syndicate, dismantling their operation piece by piece. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her. The threats that had loomed over her were finally gone, and she had uncovered the truth about her past. As she stood in front of the police station, surrounded by friends and supporters, Claire realized that she had reclaimed her life. The fear that had once consumed her had transformed into strength, and she was ready to embrace a future free from the shadows of her past. With her newfound resolve, Claire vowed to use her voice to help others who had faced similar struggles. She had fought for justice, and now she would continue to stand up against corruption, ensuring that no one else would have to live in fear. The journey had changed her, and as she looked toward the future, she felt a renewed sense of hope. The whispers in the shadows had been silenced, and she was ready to embrace a life filled with possibility. The long shadow. The creaking floorboards of the old house echoed softly as Detective John Marshall poured himself a cup of coffee. Now a retired detective living in the quiet town of Maplewood, he had traded the chaos of investigations for the tranquility of fishing and gardening. The newspaper lay open on the kitchen table, its headline catching his eye: "Mysterious new evidence emerges in the Kelsey case." John sighed, the name bringing back a flood of memories from his years on the force. The Kelsey case had been one of the most challenging investigations of his career. A young woman named Sarah Kelsey had vanished without a trace nearly 15 years ago. Despite extensive searches and countless interviews, the case had gone cold, leaving her family in despair and the community haunted by the mystery. As he read through the article, John felt a familiar pang of frustration mixed with curiosity. The new evidence was described only vaguely. A witness had come forward with information that could potentially change everything. The article hinted at a renewed interest in the case, but John knew better than to get his hopes up. Cold cases had a way of luring you in with false promises, only to leave you empty-handed. But as he sipped his coffee, he felt an undeniable pull. The detective in him lurked just beneath the surface, restless and eager to solve the puzzle that had stumped him for so long. He couldn't shake the feeling that this new lead might be the key to finally bringing closure to Sarah's family. After a moment of contemplation, John decided he needed to take action. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, determined to visit the local police department and learn more about the new evidence. The police station was bustling with activity when John arrived, the familiar sights and sounds rekindling memories of his years on the force. He approached the front desk, where a young officer looked up at him with a smile. "Detective Marshall, it's good to see you." "What brings you back?" the officer asked, clearly pleased to see him. "I wanted to know about the Kelsey case," John replied, his voice steady. "I saw the article about the new evidence." The officer's expression shifted to one of concern. "Yeah, that's a tough one. The new witness came forward last week. They say they saw something the night Sarah disappeared." "Can you get me in touch with the detective handling it?" John asked, feeling a sense of urgency. "Sure, let me see if Detective Parker is available," the officer replied, turning to check the schedule. While he waited, John felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He had spent years trying to solve the Kelsey case, poring over evidence and interviewing witnesses. The thought of new information reignited a fire within him, one that had been dimmed during his years of retirement. After a few moments, the officer returned. "Detective Parker will see you now. He's in his office down the hall." "Thank you," John said, heading toward the office. He knocked on the door, and a voice called out for him to enter. Detective Ryan Parker, a younger officer who had taken over the case, looked up from his desk, his expression a mix of surprise and respect. "John, I didn't expect to see you here. Hey, how have you been?" "Busy enjoying retirement, but I couldn't resist coming back to see what's happening with the Kelsey case," John replied, taking a seat across from Ryan. "Honestly, it's been frustrating," Ryan admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "The new witness is a guy named Tom. He says he saw a suspicious vehicle parked near the park the night Sarah went missing. But we still don't have much to go on." John leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What can you tell me about this witness? Is he reliable?" Ryan sighed, glancing at the file on his desk. "He's been in and out of trouble with the law. He's not exactly the most credible guy, but he insists he saw something." "Did he report it to the police back then?" John asked, trying to piece together the timeline. "No, he only came forward recently." "I think he's trying to clear his conscience," Ryan explained. "He claims he was too scared to say anything before." "Let's talk to him," John said, his determination rekindled. "Maybe he holds the key to finally solving this case." After a brief discussion, they decided to pay a visit to Tom's last known address. As they drove through Maplewood, John felt the weight of nostalgia wash over him. The town had changed little since he had retired, but the memories of the Kelsey case loomed large. When they arrived at the dilapidated house, John felt a sense of foreboding. The paint was peeling, and the yard was overgrown, a stark contrast to the vibrant community he remembered. They approached the front door, and Ryan knocked firmly. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a disheveled man in his 30s. Tom's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked as though he hadn't slept in days. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice defensive. "We're here to talk to you about the Kelsey case," Ryan said, identifying himself. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." Tom hesitated, glancing back into the house as if contemplating whether to let them in. "I don't know anything," he muttered, but John could see a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Please, we just want to help," John said, his tone calm and reassuring. "If you have information, it could make a difference." After a moment of silence, Tom reluctantly stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The interior of the house was cluttered and dimly lit, an overwhelming sense of despair hanging in the air. "Have a seat," Tom said, gesturing toward a worn-out couch. "But I can't promise I'll be much help." As they settled in, Ryan began to ask questions. "Can you tell us what you saw the night Sarah went missing?" Tom shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room. "I was just hanging out at the park that night, drinking a few beers. I saw a car parked near the playground. It looked suspicious." "What kind of car?" John asked, leaning forward, eager to gather any details. "An old blue sedan," Tom replied, his brow furrowing in concentration. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, I wonder if it was connected." "Did you see anyone in the car?" Ryan pressed, his tone serious. Tom shook his head. "No, it was dark. I just remember feeling uneasy. I left the park shortly after that." "Why didn't you report it back then?" John asked, his curiosity piqued. Tom sighed, his expression shifting to one of regret. "I was in a bad place. I didn't think anyone would believe me, and I was scared of getting involved." "Scared of what?" Ryan probed, sensing the underlying tension. I had my own troubles with the law, Tom admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. John felt a surge of frustration, but kept his tone measured. This is your chance to make things right. If you have any information about Sarah, it's important to share it. Tom looked down, his hands trembling. I wish I could remember more. It haunts me. I wish I had said something sooner. After a few more questions, John and Ryan thanked Tom for his time, sensing that they had only scratched the surface of his story. As they left the house, John turned to Ryan, his mind racing with possibilities. There's more to this than he's letting on, John said, determination fueling his words. We need to dig deeper into Tom's background and see if he has any connections to the case. Over the next few days, John and Ryan worked tirelessly, conducting interviews and gathering evidence. They reached out to Sarah's friends, hoping to uncover any leads that might have been overlooked. Each conversation seemed to lead them deeper into a web of secrets that surrounded the Kelsey family. One evening, while reviewing old case files, John stumbled upon a detail that had been missed during the initial investigation. Sarah had been involved in a local charity organization that supported at-risk youth. Among the names of the volunteers was a familiar one, Tom's. Ryan, come look at this, John called out, excitement coursing through him as he pointed to the document. Tom was a volunteer at the same organization as Sarah. Interesting, Ryan replied, studying the file. Do you think it could be relevant? It could explain why he felt compelled to come forward now, John mused. Let's see if we can find out more about their relationship. They reached out to the charity organization, speaking with the director, who remembered both Tom and Sarah. They worked together on a few events, the director explained. They were friendly, but not particularly close. But I do remember Sarah expressing concern about Tom's well-being. Concern? John asked, intrigued. Yes, Tom had been struggling for a while. He had a tough time after losing his job, and Sarah wanted to help him, the director replied. She was always looking out for others. John noted the connection and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you for your help. This could be significant. As they continued to investigate, they uncovered more about Tom's struggles. He had faced a series of setbacks in his life, which had driven him to the edge. Despite his troubled past, it seemed that Sarah had genuinely cared about him, which added another layer of complexity to the case. With this new information in hand, John felt a sense of urgency to confront Tom once more. They returned to his apartment, knocking on the door with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. When Tom opened the door, he looked surprised to see them again. What now? He asked, his voice wary. We found out you were a volunteer with Sarah at the charity, John said, his tone direct. Can you tell us more about your relationship with her? Tom's expression shifted, a mix of guilt and sorrow crossing his face. We worked together, but I didn't know her well. She was always kind to me, but I had my own issues to deal with. I didn't want to burden her. Did she ever confide in you about anything? Ryan pressed, sensing that Tom was holding back. Tom hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor. She mentioned feeling overwhelmed sometimes, but I didn't think it was anything serious. I just wish I had been a better friend. As they continued to talk, it became clear that Tom was grappling with guilt over his inaction. I should have done more, he admitted, his voice trembling. I didn't realize how much she was struggling. Tom, this is your chance to help, John urged, his tone firm. If you know anything that could lead us to her, please tell us. Tom took a deep breath, his expression filled with determination. There's something I didn't mention before. A few weeks before she disappeared, I overheard a conversation at the charity event. A couple of guys were talking about her. Something about her getting too involved. John leaned in, sensing the significance of the revelation. They said something about her digging too deep into things she shouldn't, Tom explained, his voice low. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now. I wonder if it was connected. Do you remember who they were? Brian asked, eager to dig deeper. Tom shook his head, frustration evident on his face. No, I didn't catch their names, but they were acting suspicious, like they knew something. Thank you for sharing that, John said, his mind racing with possibilities. We need to find out who those men were. It could be the breakthrough we need. As they left Tom's apartment, John felt a renewed sense of urgency. They had uncovered connections that could lead them closer to solving the case, but there were still many unanswered questions. Over the next few days, John and Ryan focused on tracking down the men Tom had overheard. They scoured local records and interviewed potential witnesses, piecing together a timeline of events leading up to Sarah's disappearance. Finally, they caught a break when they discovered that the men Tom had mentioned were known associates of a local gang involved in drug trafficking. Their connection to the charity organization raised alarm bells, and John felt the weight of the investigation bearing down on him. "Ryan, we need to dig deeper into the gang's operations," John urged, his determination palpable. "If they were involved, we might find evidence that connects them to Sarah." They spent the next few days gathering intel on the gang, interviewing informants, and piecing together their operations. The more they learned, the more dangerous the situation became. The gang was ruthless, and John knew they were playing with fire. One evening, as they prepared for a meeting with an informant, John received an unexpected phone call. It was Lily, Sarah's best friend, who had been deeply affected by her disappearance. "John, I need to talk to you," Lily said, her voice shaky. "I think I know something." "Meet me at the diner," John replied, sensing the urgency in her tone. When Lily arrived, she looked distraught, her eyes red-rimmed from tears. "I've been going through Sarah's things, trying to find clues," she said, her voice trembling. "And I found something." "What did you find?" John asked, leaning in closer. Lily pulled out a small notebook from her bag, her hands shaking as she handed it over. "It was hidden in her drawer. I think it's important." John opened the notebook, scanning the pages filled with Sarah's handwriting. As he read through the entries, his heart raced. Sarah had been documenting her concerns about the charity organization, noting suspicious behavior and mentioning the same men Tom had overheard. She was onto something, John said, realization dawning on him. She knew there was something wrong, and she was trying to expose it. Lily nodded, her expression filled with urgency. "I didn't want to believe it, but now I'm scared. What if they found out?" "We need to take this to the police," John said firmly. "This could be the evidence we need to connect the gang to Sarah's disappearance." But as they discussed their next steps, John felt a growing sense of dread. The gang was dangerous, and they wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who threatened their operations. The following morning, John and Ryan met with the police to present the evidence from Sarah's notebook. The officers were receptive, and they agreed to launch an investigation into the gang's activities. The stakes were high, and John felt a renewed sense of purpose as they worked together to uncover the truth. But as they delved deeper into the investigation, they began to receive threats. Anonymous notes were left on their cars, warning them to back off or face the consequences. John felt the weight of fear settling over him, but he refused to back down. "John, we need to be careful," Ryan cautioned, his voice serious. "These guys are serious about protecting their turf." "I know, but we can't let fear stop us from finding Sarah," John replied, determination fueling his words. As they continued their investigation, they uncovered a network of corruption that extended beyond the gang. The charity organization had been acting as a front for drug trafficking, using their community involvement to mask their illegal activities. With each revelation, the web of secrets grew more complex. John realized that the Kelsey case was not just about Lily. It was about exposing the darkness lurking beneath the surface of their community. As they prepared for a final confrontation with the gang, John felt a mix of fear and resolve. They had gathered enough evidence to take them down, but they needed to act quickly before the gang could retaliate. The night of the operation arrived, and John, Ryan, and the police team gathered at the staging area, their hearts racing with anticipation. They had a plan in place, but the risks were high. "We're going in," John said, his voice steady. "Stay sharp and follow my lead." As they approached the gang's hideout, tension filled the air. The sound of muffled voices could be heard from inside, a reminder of the danger that lay ahead. With a signal, they breached the door, and chaos erupted. Officers moved in with precision, apprehending gang members and securing the area. John felt a surge of adrenaline as they fought against the darkness that had plagued their community for so long. In the midst of the chaos, John spotted one of the men from Tom's overheard conversation, Marco, a known enforcer for the gang. He was attempting to escape through a back door, and John's instincts kicked in. "Stop!" John shouted, sprinting after him. Marco glanced back, panic in his eyes as he bolted outside. "Get back!" Marco yelled, reaching for a weapon. But John was faster, tackling him to the ground as they struggled for control. "Let me go!" Marco yelled, thrashing beneath John's weight. "Not a chance," John replied, determination fueling his resolve. "You're going to answer for what you've done." As the officers moved in to assist, they quickly apprehended Marco and secured the area. With the gang members in custody, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, the investigation continued to unfold. The evidence gathered during the operation led to multiple arrests, and the truth about the charity organization's illicit activities was exposed. John felt a sense of closure as he worked with the police to ensure justice was served. The Kelsey case was no longer a cold case. It had been revived and brought into the light. But as he reflected on the journey, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were still echoes of the darkness that remained. The scars left by the investigation would linger, a reminder of the challenges they had faced. As he sat on his porch one evening, watching the sun set over Maplewood, John felt a sense of gratitude for the opportunity to serve his community once more. He had faced the shadows and emerged stronger, ready to continue his work as a guardian for those in need. The Kelsey case had taught him that the truth would always surface, even when it seemed buried beneath layers of secrets. And as he looked toward the horizon, John knew that he would continue to fight for justice, no matter the obstacles that lay ahead.
The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the law office, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. John Reynolds, a renowned defense attorney in the bustling city of New York, sat at his desk, reviewing the details of his latest case. He was known for his sharp mind and relentless pursuit of justice, but this case would test him in ways he could never have anticipated. His client, Marcus Hale, was a rising star in the tech industry, accused of murdering his business rival, Jonathan Pierce, in cold blood. The case had attracted significant media attention, not only because of the high-profile nature of the individuals involved, but also due to the brutal circumstances surrounding Pierce's death. He had been found in his penthouse apartment, stabbed multiple times, and the evidence against Marcus was overwhelming. As John prepared for the day, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease settling in his gut. The trial was set to begin in just a week, and the pressure was mounting. He had spent countless hours poring over case files, witness statements, and forensic reports, but the deeper he dug, the more convoluted the case began. When he arrived at the courthouse, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Reporters crowded the entrance, eager to catch a glimpse of the players involved in the trial. John steeled himself, knowing that every word and gesture would be scrutinized. Inside the courtroom, the judge presided over the proceedings with an air of authority, and the tension was palpable. John took his seat at the defense table, glancing at Marcus, who sat across from him, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Remember, we're in this together," John said, leaning closer to Marcus. "I'll do everything I can to prove your innocence." "Thank you, John," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just want the truth to come out." As the trial began, the prosecution laid out its case with precision. They presented evidence that seemed insurmountable. Surveillance footage of Marcus entering Pierce's building, a bloody knife found in Marcus's apartment, and witnesses who claimed to have seen him leave the scene on the night of the murder. John listened intently, his mind racing as he processed the information. The prosecution had a compelling narrative, and he needed to find a way to dismantle it. After the state rested its case, John stood, preparing to make his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice steady and confident. "The prosecution would have you believe that my client is a cold-blooded killer, But the truth is far more complex. What you will see and hear over the coming days will show that Marcus Hale is not guilty of this crime. As he outlined his defense, John focused on the inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. He emphasized the lack of direct evidence linking Marcus to the murder and highlighted the possibility of an alternative suspect, someone who had a motive to harm Jonathan Pierce. After the opening statements, John began his investigation into the events leading up to the murder. He knew he needed to dig deeper into Marcus's life and the relationships he had with those in the tech industry. He started with Marcus's business associates, hoping to uncover rivalries that could provide a clearer picture of the motives behind Pierce's murder. Over the next few days, John interviewed several key figures in the tech world. He learned that Jonathan Pierce was not only a fierce competitor, but also a man with a reputation for ruthlessness. Many described him as someone who would stop at nothing to achieve success, even if it meant sabotaging others. One evening, after a long day of interviews, John returned to his office to find a message waiting for him from an unexpected source, Tina Morgan, a former employee of Pierce's company. She requested a meeting, claiming she had information that could help Marcus. Intrigued, John arranged to meet her the following day at a small cafe. When he arrived, he found Tina sitting at a corner table, her hands trembling as she stirred her coffee. She looked nervous, glancing around as if afraid someone might see her. "Thank you for meeting with me," John said, taking a seat across from her. "What do you have for me?" Tina hesitated, her gaze darting to the door. "I'm risking a lot by talking to you, but I think you need to know the truth about Jonathan." John leaned in, sensing the gravity of her words. "Go on." "Jonathan was involved in some shady business dealings," Tina revealed, her voice low. "He was using his company to manipulate stocks and undercut competitors. He had enemies, and I think someone wanted him out of the way." "Did Marcus know about this?" John asked, his mind racing. "Was he involved in any of it?" Tina shook her head. "No, Marcus had no idea. I think Jonathan was trying to keep it hidden. But I overheard conversations between Jonathan and others. They were nervous about a potential whistleblower, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their secret." John felt a surge of hope. If he could connect Jonathan's shady dealings to someone else, it might shift the focus away from Marcus. "Do you have any evidence to support this?" Tina nodded, pulling out her phone. "I saved some emails and messages. I can show you what I found." As she opened her phone, John felt his heart race. This could be the break they needed. The evidence could provide a motive for someone else to murder Jonathan, pulling the spotlight away from Marcus. After reviewing the messages and emails, John realized they contained information that could lead to a new suspect, someone who had a lot to lose if Jonathan's secrets were exposed. He thanked Tina for her help and promised to keep her informed about the case. With this new lead, John returned to the courthouse, eager to present the evidence to the judge. He filed a motion for a continuance, hoping to delay the trial long enough to investigate this new angle thoroughly. When the judge granted the continuance, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had time to dig deeper and uncover the truth. He and his team worked tirelessly, interviewing contacts mentioned in the emails and tracking down anyone who might have had a motive to kill Jonathan. As the investigation progressed, they uncovered a web of deceit that extended beyond the tech industry. Several individuals had a vested interest in Jonathan's downfall, including competitors who had lost significant investments due to his unethical practices. One name kept coming up: Richard Lawson, a former business partner of Jonathan's who had been pushed out of the company. After conducting a thorough background check, John discovered that Richard had a history of violent behavior and a motive for revenge. Determined to connect the dots, John arranged to speak with Richard. They met in a secluded coffee shop where John tried to gauge his demeanor. Richard was charming, but there was an underlying tension in his voice that made John uneasy. "Thank you for meeting with me," John said, offering a friendly smile. "I wanted to talk to you about Jonathan." Richard's expression hardened, and he leaned back in his chair. "What's there to say?" He got what was coming to him. "Is that so?" John pressed, sensing the hostility. "You seem to have a strong opinion about him." Jonathan was ruthless, Richard replied, his voice laced with bitterness. He didn't care who he hurt. He had to be stopped. John felt a flicker of intrigue. Do you think someone else could have had a motive to kill him? Richard's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in closer. I wouldn't put it past anyone in this industry. We all knew he was playing a dangerous game. Were you involved in any of his dealings? John probed, trying to get a clearer picture. Richard chuckled darkly. I wasn't stupid enough to get caught up in his schemes. But I knew what he was doing, and I wasn't the only one. As they continued to talk, John felt a growing sense of unease. Richard seemed to know more than he was letting on, and John suspected he was hiding something. After their meeting, John returned to the office, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. He knew he needed to gather more evidence against Richard to solidify his case. With his team, he began reaching out to potential witnesses and digging into Richard's past. As they delved deeper, they uncovered more about Richard's connections to the gang and the extent of Jonathan's unethical practices. The web of deceit was growing more complex, and John felt the stakes rising. One evening, as he reviewed the case files, the phone rang. It was Marcus, his voice filled with urgency. John, I'm scared. I think someone is watching me. Stay calm, John replied, his heart racing. What do you mean? I noticed a car parked outside my apartment for the last few nights, Marcus said, his voice trembling. I think they're trying to intimidate me. John felt a surge of protectiveness. I'll come by and check it out. Don't open the door for anyone. When he arrived at Marcus's apartment, he found him pacing nervously. What if they know something? Marcus asked, his eyes wide with fear. They won't get to you, John assured him, scanning the area for any signs of danger. But we need to stay vigilant. As they discussed their next steps, John felt a sense of determination. They were close to uncovering the truth, and he wouldn't let anyone intimidate them into silence. The following day, John received a call from Ryan, who had been investigating Richard's background. I think we have something, Ryan said, his voice filled with excitement. I found evidence linking Richard to some shady dealings with Jonathan. What do you mean? John asked, his heart racing. There were financial transactions between them, money exchanged just before Jonathan's death, Ryan explained. It looks like Richard might have had a motive to silence him. With this new evidence, John felt a surge of hope. They needed to act quickly before Richard could destroy any potential evidence. Let's bring this to the police, John urged, his mind racing with possibilities. When they approached the police, they presented their findings, highlighting the financial connections between Richard and Jonathan. The officers agreed to investigate further, and John felt a sense of relief wash over him. They were finally making progress. As the investigation continued, the pressure began to mount. Richard seemed to sense that the walls were closing in on him, and his demeanor became increasingly erratic. John received multiple threats, warning him to back off from the case, but he refused to be intimidated. One evening, as John was leaving the office late at night, he noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. His instincts kicked in, and he felt a surge of adrenaline as he approached the figure. Who are you? John demanded, his voice steady. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face, Richard Lawson. You shouldn't have dug into my business, John, he sneered, his eyes filled with malice. You don't know what you're getting into. I'm just trying to uncover the truth, John replied, refusing to back down. You can't intimidate me, Richard laughed darkly, taking a step closer. You think you're so clever, don't you? But you're just a pawn in a much larger game. With that, Richard turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving John feeling a mix of fear and determination. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but the danger was becoming increasingly real. As the trial approached, John and Ryan worked tirelessly to prepare their case. They gathered witness statements, financial records, and any evidence that would support their defense of Marcus. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators eager to see the outcome. As John took his place at the defense table, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was the culmination of all their hard work, and he was determined to prove Marcus's innocence. The prosecution laid out their case, presenting the evidence against Marcus with precision. They highlighted the financial disputes between him and Jonathan, painting a picture of jealousy and motive. But John remained focused, knowing that he had the evidence to counter their narrative. When it was his turn to present the defense, John stood before the jury, his voice steady and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution would have you believe that Marcus Hale is a murderer, but the truth is far more complex. The evidence will show that there are others with a motive, men who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. As he presented the evidence linking Richard to Jonathan's shady dealings, John could see the jury's interest peaking. He highlighted the financial transactions, the threats made to Marcus, and the testimony of witnesses who had come forward. As he concluded his opening statement, John felt a surge of determination. We cannot allow the shadow of doubt to cloud our judgment. The truth is out there, and it is time for justice to prevail. The trial continued over the next few days, with witness after witness taking the stand. As more evidence was revealed, the prosecution's case began to crumble. John could see the jury grappling with the conflicting narratives, and he felt a sense of hope. On the fourth day of the trial, as John was preparing to call his final witness, he received a phone call that would change everything. It was Lily, frantic and breathless. "John, you need to come to my apartment." "I found something," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "Lily, I can't right now." "We're in the middle of the trial," John replied, trying to stay focused. "This is about Jonathan. You need to see this," she insisted. Feeling a sense of urgency, John made a quick decision. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he said, hanging up the phone. He rushed to Lily's apartment, his heart racing as he entered. "What did you find?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room. Lily handed him a folder filled with papers. "I was going through Jonathan's files when I found these," she explained, her hands trembling. "There are emails between Jonathan and Richard discussing business deals, but there are also threats." Jonathan was scared of Richard. As John read through the emails, a sense of clarity washed over him. "This is it," he said, determination flooding his voice. This could prove that Richard had a motive to kill Jonathan. Just as he finished reading the emails, his phone buzzed with a text message from Ryan. "Where are you?" "You need to get back to the courthouse. The jury is waiting for your final witness." "Damn it," John muttered, quickly gathering his things. "I need to get back." As he and Lily rushed to the courthouse, John felt a surge of adrenaline. They had a chance to turn the tide of the trial, and he was determined to make the most of it. When they arrived at the courthouse, John quickly informed Ryan about the new evidence. "We need to call Richard to the stand," he said, urgency in his tone. "Are you sure about this?" Ryan asked, concern etched on his face. "He's going to tear you apart." "I need to confront him about the emails," John insisted. "This is our chance to expose the truth."
The Forgotten Pages. The summer sun hung low in the sky over the small town of Eldridge, casting a warm glow over the familiar streets. For a group of lifelong friends, Maya, Jake, Emily, and Sam, the season promised adventure and nostalgia. They had spent countless summers together, but this year felt different. As they gathered at Maya's family cabin for their annual reunion, they were excited to reminisce and create new memories. The cabin, nestled in the woods just outside of town, was a place of laughter and friendship. It was where they had spent countless weekends as kids, exploring the surrounding forests and sharing secrets late into the night. But as they settled in, Maya felt a sense of unease creeping over her. There was something about this summer that felt unfinished, as if they were on the verge of a discovery. On the second day of their reunion, while cleaning out the attic to make room for their gear, Sam stumbled upon a dusty old trunk in the corner. "Hey, check this out!" he called to the others, his voice echoing through the attic. The rest of the group gathered around, curiosity piqued. "What's inside?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with excitement. Sam pried open the trunk, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, they found an assortment of old clothes, tarnished jewelry, and a stack of yellowed papers. As he sifted through the items, one particular object caught Maya's eye, a leather-bound diary, its cover worn and faded. Look at this, Maya exclaimed, pulling the diary from the trunk. She gently brushed off the dust and opened it, revealing pages filled with elegant handwriting. Whose diary is it? Jake asked, leaning in to see. I don't know, Maya replied, her brow furrowing as she read the first few lines. It looks like it belonged to someone named Sarah. There are entries dating back to the 1980s. As Maya began to read aloud, the friends grew silent, captivated by the words on the page. The diary detailed Sarah's life in Eldridge, her dreams, and her relationships. But as they flipped through the pages, they stumbled upon something darker, a series of entries that hinted at a troubling secret. I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching me, Maya read, her voice dropping to a whisper. And here, I saw him again today. I'm scared. What does it mean? Emily asked, her curiosity piqued. Maya flipped to another entry, her heart racing. It talks about a murder that happened in town. A woman named Jessica was killed. Sarah seems to think she knows something about it. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of intrigue settling over the group. This could be important, Jake said, his eyes lighting up. We should investigate. If Sarah knew something, maybe we can uncover what really happened. The friends exchanged glances, excitement mingling with trepidation. They had always loved a good mystery, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to dive into something that would thrill them during their summer break. Let's start by finding out more about Jessica's murder, Maya suggested, closing the diary and looking around at her friends. We can go to the library tomorrow and dig through old newspapers and records. As night fell, they gathered around a campfire, the flickering flames dancing in the darkness. The sound of crickets filled the air, but an unsettling tension hung over them. They shared stories of their childhood, but the diary's contents loomed large in their minds. What if we find something dangerous? Emily asked, her voice filled with concern. What if we uncover something we're not supposed to know? Maya shrugged, trying to mask her own apprehension. We have to know the truth. If Sarah wrote about it, she must have felt it was important. The next morning, the group set out for the Eldridge Public Library, their minds buzzing with possibilities. Inside, the musty smell of old books surrounded them as they navigated the narrow aisles, searching for any reference to Jessica's murder. After hours of sifting through newspapers and archives, they finally found it, a front-page article from 1985, detailing the mysterious death of Jessica Reynolds, a 24-year-old woman who had been found dead in her apartment. The article was filled with chilling details about the crime scene and the investigation that followed, but it ultimately went cold, leaving the community in shock. Look at this, Jake said, pointing to a section of the article. It says Jessica was last seen with a man named Mark. He was never found. Could he be connected to Sarah's diary? Maya wondered aloud, her mind racing. Maybe he was the person she was afraid of. They continued to read, uncovering more about Jessica's life and the impact of her death on the community. The whispers of the past began to take shape, and with each piece of information, it felt as though they were inching closer to the truth. Let's find out more about Mark, Emily suggested. He has to be a part of this story. Armed with their newfound knowledge, the group decided to dig deeper into the lives of the people mentioned in the articles. They spent the next few days interviewing locals, who might remember the events surrounding Jessica's murder. As they gathered stories, they began to piece together a narrative filled with twists and turns. They learned that Mark had been a troubled soul, known to have a volatile temper and a history of substance abuse. Multiple witnesses recalled seeing him at the bar with Jessica just days before her death, but after that night, he vanished. Do you think he could have killed her? Sam asked, his brows furrowed in thought. It's possible, Maya replied, her voice thoughtful. But why would Sarah write about it? What connection did she have to Jessica? As they continued to investigate, they came across a mysterious figure, an old woman named Agnes who lived on the outskirts of town. Rumor had it that she knew secrets about the events that had transpired years ago. Intrigued, the friends decided to visit her, hoping she could provide answers. When they arrived at Agnes's dilapidated house, the air felt thick with anticipation. The old woman answered the door, her eyes piercing as she regarded the group. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice gruff. "We're investigating the murder of Jessica Reynolds," Maya explained, her heart racing. "We've heard you might know something about it." Agnes studied them for a moment before stepping aside to let them in. The interior of her home was cluttered with trinkets and photographs, a chaotic reflection of a life lived in isolation. "Sit," Agnes commanded, gesturing to a worn-out couch. "You youngsters are always looking for answers. But some things are better left buried." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, leaning forward. "We want to know what happened to Jessica." "The truth is a dangerous thing," Agnes replied cryptically, her eyes narrowing. "Jessica was a sweet girl, but she got too close to the wrong people. And Sarah, she knew something she shouldn't have." "Sarah, what did she know?" Maya pressed, feeling a surge of urgency. Agnes hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window as if she were remembering something painful. There were whispers about a deal gone wrong, a business transaction gone sour. Jessica and Sarah were friends, and when Sarah started to ask questions, it put her in danger. "Danger from whom?" Sam asked, his heart racing. "The men who were involved," Agnes replied, her voice low. "They had connections that reached deep into the underbelly of this town. They wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who got in their way." As the conversation continued, the friends felt a sense of unease settling over them. They were uncovering secrets that had been buried for decades, and it was clear that they were on the verge of something dangerous. "Do you know where we can find Sarah?" Maya asked, desperate for answers. Agnes shook her head. "She left town after everything happened. No one knows where she went, but be careful. If you dig too deep, you might find more than you bargained for." With that warning hanging in the air, the group left Agnes's house, their minds racing with possibilities. They needed to find Sarah, but how? And what would they do if they uncovered the truth about Jessica's murder? Determined to connect the dots, they returned to the library to search for any records of Sarah's whereabouts after Jessica's death. They combed through old newspapers, hoping to find a clue that would lead them to her. After hours of searching, they finally discovered a small article buried deep in the archives. It detailed Sarah's departure from Eldridge just weeks after Jessica's murder, mentioning that she had moved to a nearby town and changed her name. "That's it! We have a lead!" Jake exclaimed, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Let's go," Maya said, her heart racing. "We have to find her." The next day, they set out for Maplewood, the town where Sarah had reportedly moved. As they drove, anticipation mixed with anxiety. They were on the brink of uncovering the truth, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. When they arrived, they began their search for Sarah, visiting local businesses and asking questions. They learned that she had lived there for a few years, but had since vanished again, leaving no trace behind. As they sat in a cafe, frustration began to seep in. What if she doesn't want to be found? Emily wondered aloud, her voice laced with doubt. "We can't give up," Maya insisted. "We're so close." After hours of searching, they received a tip from a barista who remembered Sarah. "She used to come in here all the time," the barista said, her eyes thoughtful. "But she changed her appearance and left town suddenly. I heard she was scared." "Scared of what?" Sam asked, intrigued. "I don't know for sure, but I overheard her talking about some trouble she had with people from her past," the barista replied. As they continued their investigation, the pieces began to fit together. They learned that Sarah had been trying to distance herself from the events surrounding Jessica's murder, but it seemed that the past was not so easily forgotten. After several more inquiries, they finally found someone who had seen Sarah recently, an old neighbor who claimed she had moved to a neighboring state. "She left in a hurry, but I think she was trying to escape something," the neighbor said, her voice filled with concern. With a new lead in hand, the friends set out to track down Sarah's new location. They hoped that uncovering her whereabouts would lead them closer to the truth about Jessica's murder. After a long drive, they arrived at Sarah's new town, a quiet community nestled among rolling hills. They spent the next few days searching for her, visiting local shops and asking questions, but she remained elusive. Finally, while visiting a local bakery, they received a breakthrough. The owner recognized Sarah's name and recalled seeing her. "She came in here a lot," the owner said. her eyes lighting up. I think she works at the community center now. Excited by the lead, the friends rushed to the community center, their hearts racing with anticipation. When they arrived, they found Sarah setting up for an event, her back turned to them. The years hadn't diminished her beauty, but there was a weariness in her posture that spoke of the burdens she carried. "Sarah!" Maya called out, her voice trembling with emotion. Sarah turned slowly, her expression shifting from surprise to cautious recognition. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. "It's us, Maya, Jake, Emily, and Sam. We've been looking for you," Maya explained, stepping closer. As realization dawned on Sarah's face, her expression softened. "I didn't think anyone would ever come looking for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk about Jessica," Jake said, his tone serious. "We found your diary." Sarah's eyes widened, and she nodded, gesturing for them to follow her to a quieter area of the community center. "I thought I had buried that part of my life," she said, her voice filled with regret. As they sat down, Sarah began to recount her story, the secrets she had kept, the fear that had driven her away from Eldridge, and the pain of losing her friend. "Jessica was more than just a victim to me. She was my best friend, and I couldn't protect her," Sarah admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What happened that night?" Maya pressed, her heart aching for her friend. "I didn't know the full extent of what was happening until it was too late," Sarah explained. "After Jessica was killed, I started receiving messages, threats from people who wanted to silence me. I was terrified." They listened intently as Sarah recounted the events that led to her departure from Eldridge. "I thought leaving would keep me safe, but I always felt guilty for abandoning Jessica's memory." "You're not to blame," Emily said softly, reaching out to comfort her. "We're here to help you find justice for her." As they discussed their findings and the connections they had uncovered, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together they could confront the darkness that had haunted her for so long. With Sarah's help, they began to piece together the details surrounding Jessica's murder. They formulated a plan to confront the individuals involved, determined to uncover the truth once and for all. Over the next few weeks, the friends worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and testimonies. They reached out to individuals connected to the case, confronting those who had previously tried to intimidate Sarah. The closer they got to the truth, the more danger seemed to loom. One evening, as they were reviewing their findings, Sarah received a threatening phone call. "You need to stop digging into things that don't concern you," a voice growled on the other end. "Or you'll regret it." "Who is this?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing. But the line went dead. The group exchanged worried glances. "We need to be careful," Jake said, his expression grave. "This is getting serious." "We can't back down now," Maya insisted, her determination shining through. "We owe it to Jessica to see this through." As they prepared for the final confrontation, they knew they had to tread carefully. They had uncovered a web of lies and deceit, and the stakes were higher than ever. The day of their confrontation arrived, and the group gathered in a secluded location where they planned to meet the individuals involved. As they waited, a sense of anxiety hung in the air, but they were determined to face the truth. When the individuals arrived, tension filled the atmosphere. The group stood firm, ready to confront the darkness that had haunted them for so long. "Why did you do it?" Sarah demanded, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Why did you take Jessica from us?" The individuals exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to defensiveness. "You don't know what you're talking about," one of them sneered. "We know everything," Maya said, her voice rising. "We have evidence that connects you to her murder. It's time to face the consequences." The confrontation escalated, but the group stood their ground. They presented their findings, and as the pieces of the puzzle came together, the individuals began to crumble under the weight of their lies. In the end, the truth prevailed. The individuals involved were brought to justice, and Sarah finally found the closure she had long sought. The weight of the past lifted, and the friends felt a renewed sense of purpose. As they stood together, reflecting on their journey, Sarah realized that they had not only uncovered the truth about Jessica's murder, but had also forged a bond that would last a lifetime. They had faced darkness together and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found solace in the memories of her friend. She vowed to honor Jessica's legacy by continuing to fight for justice and helping others who had faced similar struggles. The summer had changed them all, and as they gathered for one last celebration at the cabin, they reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them together. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the sounds of nature surrounding them. As the sun set over the horizon, the friends knew that they had faced the shadows of the past and emerged into the light. Together, they had uncovered a decades-old murder and forged alliances that would last a lifetime, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope and friendship could prevail. Unexpected alliances. The night was quiet in the small suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, the kind of calm that enveloped the streets after a long day. Street lamps flickered to life, casting soft pools of light on the asphalt as families settled in for the evening. Inside the Peterson home, Sarah Peterson was preparing for bed, her thoughts drifting between the mundane tasks of life and the excitement of her upcoming birthday. Sarah was a single mother, balancing a demanding job as a graphic designer with the responsibilities of raising her 12-year-old son, Jake. As she tucked him in, his youthful energy still buzzing, she couldn't help but smile at how much he had grown. "Just one more day until your big birthday adventure, buddy," she said, ruffling his hair. "Can't wait, Mom. Just promise we won't miss the party bus." Jake replied, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Promise," she said, her heart swelling with love. After exchanging goodnight hugs, Sarah retreated to her bedroom, exhausted but content. As she settled into bed, flipping through her phone to check the latest messages, a sudden noise jolted her from her thoughts. It was faint, perhaps a creak or a thud coming from downstairs. Sarah's heart raced. She brushed it off as her imagination playing tricks on her. After a long day, it was easy to misinterpret the sounds of an old house settling. But then she heard it again, louder this time, a distinct sound of footsteps followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Panic surged through her as she realized the noise was coming from the living room. She reached for her phone, ready to call the police, but before she could dial, she heard a low voice calling out. "Anyone home?" The voice was deep and gravelly, sending a chill down her spine. Sarah's mind raced as she quickly turned off her phone screen, trying to remain silent. She slipped out of bed, her heart pounding in her chest. With her pulse racing, she crept toward the bedroom door, listening intently. There was no doubt now. Someone had broken into her home. In the living room, a figure moved through the darkness, rifling through drawers and searching for valuables. The intruder was tall and muscular, dressed in dark clothing that obscured his features. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she contemplated her options. She could hide, or she could confront him, but the thought of confronting a stranger in her own home terrified her. Suddenly she heard a loud crash followed by a curse. The intruder had knocked over a lamp, and in that moment of chaos, Sarah made her decision. She darted down the hallway to the kitchen, where she grabbed a heavy frying pan. If she was going to confront him, she needed to be prepared. With the pan gripped tightly in her hands, Sarah crept back toward the living room, her heart racing. As she turned the corner, the intruder's silhouette came into view, and she raised the pan high above her head. "Get out! I have a weapon!" she shouted, her voice trembling but firm. The intruder froze, turning slowly to face her. For a moment, they both stood in shock, sizing each other up. The tension hung thick in the air, and Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. "Put that down, lady. I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, though laced with an edge of desperation. "Then why are you in my house?" Sarah demanded, gripping the pan tighter. "Look, I just need some cash." "I'm in a bad situation," he replied, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I won't hurt you. Just let me leave with what I need." Sarah's instincts told her to call the police, but something in his voice made her hesitate. She could see the fear in his eyes, and for a brief moment, she felt a flicker of empathy. "What's your name?" she asked, lowering the pan slightly. "Caleb. he replied, his gaze shifting nervously. I swear I didn't want to do this, but I have no choice. Why are you doing this? Sarah pressed, her heart still racing but her curiosity piqued. I lost my job last month, he explained, his voice cracking. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but everything just keeps getting worse. I thought I could just grab some money and get out without anyone getting hurt. Sarah felt her defenses begin to lower. What about your family, friends? Family's out of the picture, Caleb said, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and anger. I don't have anyone left. A pause hung in the air as they stared at each other, two strangers caught in an extraordinary moment of vulnerability. Look, I can't let you leave with the money, Sarah said, her voice steadying. But if you're really in trouble, maybe we can figure something out. Caleb's expression shifted, surprise mingling with skepticism. What do you mean? I can help you, she said, surprising even herself. But you have to promise not to hurt me. We can talk this through, maybe find a way to get you back on your feet without resorting to this. Caleb hesitated, his internal battle evident on his face. Why would you help me? I broke into your home. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped, Sarah replied, her voice softening. I've had my own struggles. I understand what it's like to feel desperate. In that moment, something shifted between them. Caleb lowered his hands, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. You really mean that? Yes, she replied, her heart racing. But you need to put the past behind you. You can't keep living like this. Caleb took a deep breath, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. All right, I'll put the knife down. I just need to know I can trust you. Then let's talk, Sarah said, lowering the frying pan completely and setting it on the counter. No more violence. I just want to understand. As they sat down at the kitchen table, the tension slowly dissipated. Sarah learned more about Caleb's life, how he had lost his job in a struggling economy, how he felt abandoned and isolated. The more he spoke, the more Sarah saw a man trying to navigate a difficult world, not a dangerous criminal. I didn't want to do this, Caleb admitted, his voice filled with remorse. I just didn't see any other way. I get that, Sarah said, her tone empathetic. But there are better options. You can start over. Caleb looked at her, skepticism still lingering in his eyes. How? I don't have any money, no resources. We can figure something out together, Sarah suggested. I can help you find work or connect you with resources. You don't have to keep living this way. For the first time, Caleb appeared vulnerable, as though he was considering the possibility of change. Why are you doing this? Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, she replied, surprising herself with her own conviction. As they began to brainstorm potential solutions, Sarah felt a strange sense of connection forming. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, there was an undeniable bond forming between them. They were two people from different worlds, yet both struggling to find their way. Over the next few hours, they talked about their lives, their dreams, and their regrets. Sarah learned about Caleb's passion for graphic design, a skill he had honed before life had taken a turn for the worse. I used to love creating art, but I stopped when everything fell apart, he confessed. You should pick it back up, Sarah encouraged. There are community programs that could help you get back on your feet. As the conversation continued, Sarah felt an unexpected warmth in her heart. She had never imagined that she could find common ground with someone who had broken into her home. But here they were, two individuals forming an alliance in the unlikeliest of circumstances. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah realized that their time together had shifted her perspective. You know, maybe we can work together, she suggested. I could use some help with a project I've been working on. It could be a fresh start for both of us. Caleb looked at her, surprise etched on his face. You'd really do that? I would, she said, her voice steady. But first, let's figure out how to make sure you're not in this situation again. We need to get you the help you need. As the first rays of sunlight filtered into the kitchen, Sarah and Caleb began to outline a plan. They discussed the local resources available for job training, community programs, and even potential freelance opportunities. It was a far cry from the chaos of the last few hours, and both felt a sense of hope blooming. However, the reality of Caleb's situation still loomed large. "What about the police?" Caleb asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "I broke into your home. They'll be looking for me." "We can face that together," Sarah replied, her tone resolute. "But first, let's get you sorted out. I'll help you find legal representation, and we'll figure out a way to address the situation." With a plan in place, they worked together to gather resources and information. Sarah helped Caleb navigate the local job market, utilizing her connections to find potential opportunities. They spent hours poring over job listings and discussing Caleb's skills, crafting a resume that showcased his talents. As they worked side by side, Sarah found herself growing fond of Caleb. He was intelligent, creative, and surprisingly insightful. They shared laughs and stories, their initial circumstances forgotten as they forged an unexpected friendship. But as the days turned into weeks, the reality of Caleb's situation began to weigh heavily on them. The police were still actively searching for him, and Sarah knew they couldn't hide forever. It was time to confront the situation head-on. One evening, as they sat in Sarah's living room, she turned to Caleb, her expression serious. "We need to go to the police. It's the right thing to do." Caleb's face fell, fear flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. I can't go back to jail. I'll lose everything." "You have a chance to explain your side of the story," Sarah urged, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't hurt anyone. You were desperate. If we go together, I can vouch for you." After a long silence, Caleb finally nodded, his resolve wavering. "All right, but I'm scared." "I'll be with you every step of the way," Sarah assured him, determination flooding her veins. "We'll make this right." The next day, they arrived at the police station, Caleb's heart pounding in his chest. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him, but Sarah's presence provided a sense of strength. As they walked through the doors, Caleb took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment that would change everything. They approached the front desk, and Sarah spoke to the officer on duty. "My name is Sarah Peterson, and this is Caleb. He wants to turn himself in regarding the home invasion incident." The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at Caleb. "You're the intruder," Caleb nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean any harm. I was desperate." As they were led into an interview room, Caleb felt the gravity of the situation settle over him. He was terrified of the repercussions, but he also knew he had to face the consequences of his actions. The detective assigned to the case entered the room, a seasoned officer with a no-nonsense demeanor. "All right, let's get started. You're here to explain your side of the story?" "Yes," Caleb replied, his voice shaking. I broke into Sarah's home. I was desperate for money, but I didn't want to hurt anyone." The detective listened intently as Caleb recounted the events of that night, his voice filled with remorse. He explained how he had lost his job and felt like he had no other options. "I never intended to hurt anyone. I just wanted to get by." Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. "He didn't hurt me. He was scared and desperate, just like anyone might be in his situation." The detective nodded, taking notes as Caleb continued to speak. "I'm willing to face the consequences, but I want to make things right. I want to find a way to move forward." As the interview progressed, Sarah could see the detective softening. It was clear that Caleb's honesty and remorse were making an impact. After the interview concluded, the detective stood up, extending a hand to Caleb. "Thank you for being truthful. We'll work with you to find a resolution," he said, his tone surprisingly compassionate. As they left the police station, Caleb felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. "I can't believe I actually did that," he said, a mix of relief and apprehension in his voice. "You faced it head on," Sarah replied, her voice filled with pride. "Now we can focus on getting you back on track." Over the following weeks, Caleb began to rebuild his life. With Sarah's support, he secured a job at a local graphic design firm. They worked together to create a portfolio that showcased his skills, and he quickly earned a reputation for his creativity and dedication. As they spent time together, a deep bond formed between them. They became each other's support system, navigating the challenges of life with newfound resilience. Caleb had transformed from a desperate intruder into a motivated individual working toward a brighter future. But the shadows of Caleb's past still lingered. He had to attend court hearings related to the home invasion, and each appearance was a reminder of the mistakes he had made. Despite the progress he was making, the specter of his former life loomed large. On the day of his sentencing, Caleb sat nervously in the courtroom, his heart racing as he awaited the verdict. Sarah sat beside him, offering a reassuring presence. The judge entered the room, and the atmosphere shifted as everyone turned to face him. "Mr. Lawson, after reviewing the circumstances of your case and considering the testimonies provided, I am willing to offer you a chance at rehabilitation," the judge announced, his voice steady. "You will serve 6 months of community service and be required to attend counseling sessions. Your record will be cleared upon successful completion." Caleb's heart soared with relief, and he turned to Sarah, who was beaming with pride. "Thank you for standing by me," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." As the months passed, Caleb completed his community service and attended counseling sessions, slowly rebuilding his life. He found a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the support of Sarah and the friendships he had forged along the way. The bond between them deepened, and what began as an unlikely alliance blossomed into a meaningful relationship. They shared laughter, tears, and the occasional adventurous outing, exploring the joys of life together. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront, Caleb turned to Sarah, his expression serious. "I never thought I'd be here, living a life I'm proud of. You changed everything for me." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "You did the hard work. You faced your fears and took responsibility. I just helped you see the possibilities." As they stood together, watching the sun set over the horizon, Caleb felt a sense of hope and gratitude wash over him. The shadows of his past no longer defined him. He was no longer the desperate intruder, but a man committed to building a better future. "Thank you for believing in me," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I wouldn't be here without you." And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the water and the stars began to emerge, Sarah realized that their unexpected alliance had transformed both of their lives in ways they had never imagined. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As they walked hand in hand, the future stretched out before them, full of promise and potential. Together, they would navigate the complexities of life, forging a path of hope and resilience, proving that even in the most unlikely of circumstances, redemption was possible. The neon lights flickered in the damp night air as Ethan Carter stepped out of the bar, a sense of relief washing over him. It had been a long week, and all he wanted was to unwind with a few friends. The music inside had thumped vibrantly, drowning out the world outside, but now the streets felt eerily quiet. He glanced at his phone. It was just past midnight, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Ethan was a 24-year-old college student studying criminal justice at a local university. He had always been fascinated by the intricacies of the law, but tonight felt different. He was still buzzing from laughter with his friends, but a nagging feeling lingered in the back of his mind. As he walked toward his beat-up old car, parked a few blocks away, he noticed a group of men huddled in an alley, their silhouettes outlined against the dim light. Curiosity piqued, Ethan slowed his pace. He could hear snippets of their conversation, a heated argument punctuated by harsh words. He was about to turn away when he heard a shout, followed by a loud bang that echoed through the alley. His heart raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the urge to see what was happening. Peering into the alley, his heart dropped. A man lay on the ground, blood pooling around him, while the others scrambled in chaos. One of the men, tall and menacing, stood over the victim, his face twisted in rage. "You shouldn't have crossed us," he yelled, his voice dripping with venom. Ethan felt a sickening churn in his stomach as he realized he was witnessing a murder. Panic surged through him, and he instinctively stepped back, trying to make himself invisible. He needed to get out of there, to get to safety. But as he turned to leave, his foot caught on a loose cobblestone, and he stumbled, sending a small rock skittering across the pavement. The sound echoed in the stillness, and the men turned, their eyes locking onto Ethan's wide, terrified face. Time seemed to freeze as he met the gaze of the man who had pulled the trigger. A flicker of recognition passed between them, and Ethan felt a primal instinct to run. Before he could react, the man shouted, "Hey! You! Get back here!" Ethan took off, adrenaline propelling him forward as he sprinted down the street, his heart racing in his chest. He didn't dare look back, fear driving him to run faster. He needed to get to his car, to drive away from this nightmare. As he reached his vehicle, he fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. He could hear footsteps behind him, growing louder and closer. With a burst of energy, he finally managed to unlock the door and jumped inside, slamming it behind him. He quickly started the engine, his heart pounding as he peeled away from the curb, glancing in the rearview mirror. The men were still in the alley, but he could see one of them pulling out his phone, likely calling someone. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't go home, not yet. They'd know where to find him. He needed a plan. As he drove through the dimly lit streets, he felt a sense of dread creeping in. The city that had always felt like home now seemed foreign and dangerous. He couldn't shake the feeling that the men would come for him, that they would hunt him down to eliminate any witness to their crime. Ethan pulled into a gas station, scanning the parking lot for any sign of danger. He parked in a corner, away from the main lights, and took a few deep breaths to steady himself. He needed to think clearly. Who could he trust? Who could help him navigate the criminal underworld that he had stumbled into? His mind raced back to his classes. He had learned about informants and the way the criminal justice system worked, but this was different. This wasn't a textbook scenario. This was real life, and he was in over his head. He needed to contact someone who could help. His first thought was his friend, Marcus, who had connections in law enforcement. Although Marcus was a beat cop, he had always been the type to help Ethan navigate tricky situations. He quickly dialed Marcus's number, his heart racing with fear as the phone rang. "Carter, what's up?" Marcus answered, his voice relaxed. "Marcus, I need your help. I just witnessed a murder," Ethan blurted out, his voice strained. There was a pause on the other end, the jovial tone of Marcus's voice evaporating. "What, are you serious?" "Yes. I don't know what to do. They saw me." Ethan's voice cracked with panic. "Where are you?" Marcus asked, his tone shifting to urgency. "I'm at the gas station on 5th and Main," Ethan replied, glancing around nervously. "Stay put. I'll be there in a few minutes." "Don't talk to anyone. Just stay inside your car," Marcus instructed. Ethan hung up, feeling the weight of dread settle over him. He glanced at the entrance of the gas station, his fear mounting as he waited for Marcus to arrive. Minutes felt like hours, and every sound made him jump. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Finally, he spotted Marcus's patrol car pull into the parking lot, relief flooding through him. Marcus stepped out, his expression serious as he approached Ethan's car. "Get in," he said, glancing around cautiously. Ethan quickly unlocked the door, and Marcus slid into the passenger seat. "Tell me everything," Marcus urged, his voice low. Ethan recounted the events of the night, his heart racing as he relived the horror of what he had witnessed. They were arguing, and then one of them shot the guy. "I don't know who they were, but they looked dangerous." Marcus nodded, deep in thought. "We need to get you to a safe place. You can't go home, and you can't be seen until we figure this out." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, panic creeping into his voice. "What if they come after me? What if they find me?" "I'll take you to the precinct." "We'll keep you safe there until we can sort this out," Marcus assured him, his tone firm. As they drove to the precinct, Ethan felt a mix of fear and gratitude. Marcus was his friend, but he was also a cop, a connection that could help him navigate the perilous situation he had found himself in. He had no idea what the future would hold, but he knew he had to trust Marcus to protect him. When they arrived at the precinct, Marcus led Ethan through the back entrance, ensuring that no one saw them. The precinct was bustling with activity, officers moving about as they handled their duties. Marcus took Ethan into an interrogation room, closing the door behind them. "Stay here for a moment. I need to talk to my captain," Marcus said, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The room felt suffocating, the fluorescent lights buzzing above him. Ethan paced the floor, his mind racing. What if the men came after him? What if they knew where he was? Minutes later, Marcus returned, looking serious. Ethan, we need to have a frank conversation. Your life is in danger right now. The people you saw are not just random criminals. They're part of a larger organization that doesn't take kindly to witnesses. What do we do? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. We're going to put you in protective custody for now, Marcus replied. We'll move you to a safe location, and I'll stay in contact with you. But you have to be careful. Don't say anything to anyone about what you witnessed. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle over him. What about my family? I can't just disappear. I'll help you reach out to them, but they need to understand that it's for their safety too, Marcus said, his tone firm but compassionate. We'll figure this out together. As they made arrangements for Ethan's protective custody, he felt a sense of dread wash over him. He had never imagined he would find himself in a situation like this, living in fear and uncertainty. Later that night, Marcus took Ethan to a safe house on the outskirts of town, a nondescript building that blended into the surroundings. Inside, the atmosphere felt tense but secure. It was a far cry from the life Ethan had known, but he knew it was necessary. Stay here and I'll check in regularly, Marcus said, his expression serious. If you need anything, call me. We'll get through this. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. As Marcus left, the reality of his situation sank in. He was alone, cut off from his life and living in the shadows. Days turned into weeks, and while the police investigation into the murder continued, Ethan remained in the safe house, isolated from the world. He spent his time watching the news and anxiously waiting for updates, but every report about the murder seemed to deepen his sense of unease. One evening, as he sat in the dimly lit living room, Ethan received a text from Marcus. We have a lead on the suspects. I'll be in touch soon. His heart raced with a mix of hope and fear. Maybe they would find the men responsible for the murder and put an end to the threats. But as the days passed, Ethan's anxiety grew. He was living in constant fear, wondering if the men who had committed the crime would come looking for him. Then one night, everything changed. Ethan was jolted awake by the sound of a loud crash outside the safe house. Heart pounding, he quickly grabbed his phone and texted Marcus. Something's happening. I think someone is here. Stay quiet and stay inside, Marcus replied, his tone urgent. Ethan could hear footsteps approaching, the sound of someone trying to force their way inside. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to find a place to hide. He ducked behind the couch, holding his breath as the door creaked open. The intruder stepped inside, their silhouette dark against the doorway. Ethan's heart raced as he strained to hear the sounds around him. The intruder was searching the house, moving from room to room, but they hadn't found him yet. Just when Ethan thought he was safe, he heard a voice, a low, menacing growl that sent chills down his spine. I know you're in here. You can't hide forever. Ethan's pulse quickened as he fought to stay quiet. He could feel the weight of fear pressing down on him, and his mind raced with thoughts of escape. Would Marcus arrive in time? What if he was caught? As the intruder continued to search, Ethan's thoughts drifted to the life he had left behind, the friends, the family, the future he had envisioned. But now it felt like everything was slipping away. Suddenly the intruder paused, their footsteps growing closer. You think you can just disappear? You saw too much and now you're going to pay, they sneered. Ethan's heart raced as he prepared to make a run for it. He had to escape before it was too late. Just as he was about to bolt for the back door, he heard another sound, the unmistakable sound of sirens approaching. The intruder's expression shifted, panic flashing across their face. No, not now, they shouted, turning to flee. Ethan seized the opportunity and dashed for the back door, bursting out into the cool night air. He sprinted toward the trees lining the property, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the sirens getting closer, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As he reached the tree line, he glanced back to see the intruder disappearing into the shadows. He couldn't let them get away. He had to know who they were to see their face. Ethan, where are you? He heard Marcus's voice calling out, and he felt a surge of relief. I'm over here, Ethan shouted, running toward the sound. Marcus emerged from the trees, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but they were here." "I think they were looking for me," Ethan replied, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Marcus quickly assessed the situation, his eyes scanning the area. "We need to get you out of here. They know you're a witness now, and they'll stop at nothing to silence you." As they made their way back to the car, Ethan felt a surge of fear. He had come face to face with the darkness that had haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. In the following days, the police stepped up their efforts to protect Ethan. He was moved to a more secure location, and Marcus remained by his side, providing support and guidance. They continued to gather evidence against the syndicate, working tirelessly to bring the criminals to justice. But the threats didn't stop. Ethan received more anonymous messages, taunting him and warning him to stay silent. The fear that had once consumed him began to transform into anger. He was tired of living in the shadows, tired of being hunted. One night, as he sat in the secure location, he made a decision. He couldn't let fear control his life any longer. He needed to take a stand. "Marcus, I want to help take them down," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I can't keep hiding. I need to confront them." Marcus looked at him, concern etched on his face. "Ethan, it's dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." "I know, but I can't live like this anymore," Ethan replied, determination shining in his eyes. "I want to help you gather evidence, and I want to testify against them. I need to reclaim my life." After a long pause, Marcus nodded. "All right, but we do this my way. We gather everything we have and we make a plan. I won't let you put yourself in unnecessary danger." In the days that followed, Ethan and Marcus worked tirelessly, gathering evidence against the syndicate. They interviewed witnesses, dug through records, and compiled a case that would expose the criminals for who they truly were. As the investigation progressed, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a victim. He was an active participant in the fight against the darkness that had threatened to consume him. The day of the confrontation arrived, and Ethan felt a mix of fear and determination. They had set up a meeting with key members of the syndicate, hoping to gather enough evidence to take them down. The stakes were high, and Ethan knew that this was his chance to reclaim his life. As they approached the meeting location, a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He was ready to face the men who had threatened him, to confront the shadows of his past. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was tense. The air felt thick with danger, and Ethan's heart raced as he took in the scene. The syndicate members were gathered around a table, their expressions dark and menacing. "Ethan Carter," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "What brings you here?" "I'm here to expose you for what you are," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The men exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to anger. "You think you can just walk in here and threaten us?" another man said, stepping closer. "I'm not threatening you. I'm here to bring the truth to light," Ethan asserted, feeling the weight of his words. As the confrontation escalated, Marcus and the police burst into the warehouse, apprehending the syndicate members in a coordinated operation. The chaos unfolded quickly, and Ethan felt a surge of relief as the men were taken into custody. In the aftermath, as the dust settled, Ethan realized that he had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. The fear that had once consumed him had transformed into strength, and he had reclaimed his life.